Hey gang, your old buddy Clay here, Mountain Music Exchange, and I'm really excited. We are getting ready to do kind of a string of videos on some of the new Gibson Modern Series guitars. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so what I plan to do here is we're going to talk about in a series of videos, not just one video, we're going to talk about the new Modern series, sort of the newer ones that have come out lately. I know the Modern Standard's been out for a while. I'm sure if you guys have made it to this channel, you've probably seen plenty of those videos by now. But I wanted to talk about some of these newer ones, and I really think this one's kind of interesting to talk about. It's a newer one from Gibson. It is the Gibson Les Paul Modern Lite. This one is in TV satin wheat, and it's an interesting guitar. I have a lot kind of to say about this guitar. It's got a slim taper neck. We'll start top to bottom though, since we're already here. You can see there's a matching headstock in every one of these models. You can get these in different colors. You can get them in satin Inverness green, satin rose gold, a couple of others that are pretty cool looking colors as well. They're all interesting, kind of, you know, like bright colors. There's like a cardinal red that's really cool with the matching headstock that I really like. And I wish I could show you guys that one directly, but here we are with this really cool TV wheat satin. This is sort of like, you think TV and your mind sort of already goes to like TV yellow or maybe even like a TV pale and blue. But this color is just a cool color. It looks like an aged white guitar. So it gives me that sort of, I've got a really good friend who has a very aged Les Paul Studio, and this gives me vibes of that guitar just in the color, you know. And it's just a really, I don't know, it was sort of almost, I don't want to say Randy Rhoads because there's a big difference in the guitars, but sort of gives me a little bit of that vibe too, just with the kind of off-white color here that I think is really just a neat look. But you've got a matching headstock in every one of these models, every color. You also get Grover Mini Rotomatic tuners, and it's an interesting choice, the Mini Rotos, for this particular guitar, and I think it sort of gives it this sort of almost button look, but you get a really high quality tuner instead of just the button. Not that those tuners won't hold tune, but Rotomatics will definitely hold tune. You can kind of push in the screws here with a screwdriver to kind of adjust the tension on the actual machine head itself, which I think is pretty neat. You've got a mahogany neck, one piece, same as all other Gibsons. You've got a mahogany body, and this one, of course, the first thing you'll notice is that it is much thinner and has like a belly carve here. I'm sure it has a much more professional, or whatever you might say, sounding name, but we're gonna call it the belly carve because that's essentially what it is. And you can really feel, and I'm gonna get you some close-ups too of this, the wood grain a lot in all of this guitar, and that's the top, the neck, the back, the whole body, everything. You can really feel the wood grain, but it's very smooth nonetheless. The neck feels very fast. If you wanted to kind of scream up and down the fretboard on it, you could totally do that. You got 22 frets here, and you've also got Gibson 490 and 498 pickups. Now, if you've seen any of the old Mountain Music Exchange videos, or even some of the more recent ones, you know that I've sung the praises of these pickups. People tend to think they are on the lower end of the spectrum because they are in guitars that are priced here, like at the $14.99 price point, sort of the entry-level Gibson price point now. But that's not really the case. My Les Paul Custom has 490, 498s in it as well. So this is a sort of a good all-rounder set of pickups. You've got a mild output here, sort of in that 7-ish range, mid-7s maybe. And then you've got kind of a much more pronounced output here. Alnico 2 magnet in the neck, Alnico 5 in the bridge. The Alnico 5, you're in that sort of 14-ish, give or take, range. And it is pretty hot. It will take gain really well, but it also cleans up and gets pretty crisp without sounding thin or anything like that. I'm gonna let you guys hear that a little bit later on too. Rosewood fingerboard here. The frets are extremely well done. No binding on the neck, of course, but I don't feel any sprout or any sort of anything that would impede the speed. If you want to play all up and down the fretboard, you're not going to get caught on these. They are really well done. And I'm sure there's probably somebody who could get in here and tell you like the real you know, in-depth ins and outs of these frets and what could or could not be done to make them better as far as, you know, the way they're filed down and finished. But quite frankly, just from a dude who has a hold of a guitar right now and I'm playing it, you know, with my hands going up and down the fingerboard, it's smooth, it's fast. They do not get in the way. You've got pearloid dot inlays here. Of course, you've got your silkscreen black Gibson logo and Les Paul model logo as well. Black plastic work all the way around. That includes the plastic switch tip and of course, you know, the knobs, pick guard, rings, etc. I think that's a really good look for this guitar and the other models too, because the colors are so bright. It just sort of sits, it offsets well and sits on this really nice. And you've got a Nashville style bridge here. Something I've always liked about the Nashvilles, especially since around 2016, and then, you know, the new management with Gibson sort of carried this on, is you do get an Allen key adjustment here. So you do not have to loosen your strings to adjust your action. Now, of course, you're gonna have to retune once you're done, but that's a given no matter what. But you're not gonna have to loosen your strings. You can just kind of, you know, tighten these, loosen these, bring it up, bring it down, and then just retune and you're ready to go. You do not have to go through an entire process, so to speak, just to get your action the way that you want it. And of course, with this 12-inch radius fretboard, the action is going to be probably about anywhere you want it to be. If you want it to be super low, like this one pretty much is, it's going to be super low. If you want it to kind of be higher, if that's your thing. Some people kind of like to fight with the guitar, and that's okay. And then of course you have the Gibson sort of modern strap button here, which you'll find on pretty much every sort of new Gibson that comes out and has been coming out for the last little bit. They're a little more flared out and they're wider at the top. And I know if you've seen my earlier videos, you've probably heard me preach this, but you want as much mass as you can have up here just to keep that strap on, especially in this location where you're sort of at an angle here. You want to be able to hold that strap on as best as you possibly can. These strap buttons are better than the old strap buttons, even if they're not historically accurate. But then again, nothing else about this guitar is really historically accurate. You do get a carved top with this guitar, but it is carved mahogany. This is like a whole slab of mahogany and then just carved up. I'm not sure if the body is one or more pieces. It is very difficult for me to see the seam line for what that is worth. You do get a carved top, but you do not get that maple top with this guitar. That's going to be when you get up into that modern studio and above. You get closer to traditional specs, and then of course some very non-traditional specs as well. This guitar is also very, very straightforward, which I like. So this guitar doesn't have push-pulls, anything like that. It is just a very, very straightforward, I don't want to say bare bones, but it's kind of bare bones. And I think this would make a killer, just a rock machine. The satin finish is really cool. It's still nitro, so it's gonna wear and it's gonna age really well. Now, it's not gonna age overnight, and it's not gonna age probably, you know, without playing it extremely heavily over time, but it's gonna look really cool when it does. It's gonna have a very, very sort of barn find guitar kind of look to it if you make all the right moves over the right amount of time, you know. I think this is a really interesting entry level to Gibson guitar. I think, you know, if you're working your way up, for example, I think this is a really good place. Let's say you've started with your My First Guitar sort of Epiphone, and you're in that sort of $500 range, and then you work your way up to maybe one of the Epiphone inspired by Gibson customs, and then maybe you end up here. I think this is a really good introduction to what a Gibson feels like, how a Gibson plays, what the difference is in feel between a Gibson and say an Epiphone, sort of what the sort of overall aesthetic of having a Gibson guitar is. And of course, you know, it's not, when I say the overall aesthetic, obviously the body is thinner, the guitar is much, much lighter. This is probably something closer in weight to an SG than a Les Paul. And that's not a bad thing either. Because if you're an experienced player and you've played a 4-hour gig with a Les Paul, your collarbone might thank you for downsizing to something like this. And let's say, for example, you've been playing a regular, you know, traditional Les Paul Studio or even a Les Paul Custom. You don't have to even change the pickups. The pickups are still what you would find in those more upscale models from this one. I just think this is a really interesting direction for Gibson to take in sort of introducing folks to the brand proper. You know, I know I mentioned the Epiphone inspired by Gibson Custom earlier. Now it just occurred to me that they're pretty much the same price as these, right? But as good as those guitars are, and they are extremely good and appointed extremely well, there is still something that is not exactly the same, and it doesn't feel exactly like a Gibson guitar that's made in Nashville. And this one does still feel like that. This one has the same feel as a more upscale Gibson guitar. And the reason I say that is it's still handmade. The necks are still made right along the same place. The bodies are still made right in the same line. The rosewood is sourced from the exact same place. And the handwork that goes into these, now not including the binding of course, because this is not a bound guitar, but the handwork that goes into these as far as, you know, your neck carve and getting your fretboard to match up to just minute details that all sort of add up to make this guitar still feel like a Gibson guitar. And if you're a little bit older like I am, this will probably put you in the mind of one of the older, like the Gibson Goddess or Vixen guitars, except now you have full control and a full bridge and tailpiece as opposed to those models. But the Lite guitar is a good introduction to someone who is familiar with Gibson but hasn't really experienced Gibson. And it's also a really good sort of gigging guitar for an experienced player because, again, it's so much lighter. It's just as versatile as any other Gibson Les Paul that you play, or an SG for that matter. You know, you could play the same songs on it, I guess is what I'm getting at. So it's just a cool guitar. Another little aesthetic piece I didn't mention here, but just a straight black truss rod cover. And I think especially with this TV wheat satin that it works really well without the multi-ply truss rod cover, just because it again offsets like the rest of the black plastic work here. The chrome hardware also really works with this and the other colors as well. So I don't know, I just think it's a really cool guitar, and I want to let you guys hear it in just a second. I think that you will really enjoy the way it sounds, and furthermore, I think if you went and played one of these, you would really enjoy the way that these feel just as a playing guitar. Looking aside from just spec sheet stuff, you know, we can all go online. I'm massively guilty of just going online, looking at spec sheets, comparing that to something else and going, oh, well, you know, this is not appointed like this is, so, you know, X is not appointed like Y is, so Y must be better than X, right? Not necessarily. There are a lot of little touches, details, and appointments here that add up that, again, make this feel like a Gibson guitar and make it feel worth the $14.99 price tag. It also comes with an extremely quality gig bag. I'm gonna get you guys some close-ups of it, but I also want to take a second to talk about it. These Gibson Modern gig bags that they've been doing for the last few years now are actually pretty nice. If there are any sort of detractors for gig bags versus a hard case, I'm not one of those folks at all. I'm definitely not. They have thought this gig bag through and through, and I think at the price point especially, but quite frankly, I would carry a more expensive guitar in this gig bag, and I'm not exaggerating that. I would carry a more expensive guitar in these gig bags than what Gibson ships in these gig bags, and I'll tell you why. First off, if you can see it, and I'm gonna get you some close-ups again, the leather on these gig bags is really, really soft. It feels like, almost like a leather jacket in every good way. When you just read the spec sheet and it says gig bag included, right? It is not the chintzy, thin gig bags that just fold up when you set them next to the wall or whatever. I mean, you can see these gig bags are stout. They don't budge, they don't move. And quite frankly, I would feel better if, God forbid, I dropped my guitar and I was, you know, if it were in the case versus in the gig bag, right? If I dropped this gig bag, I think I would feel safer than if I dropped it in a case. And the reason being is that this case will absorb more. This gig bag will absorb impact and sort of distribute it, whereas like a case will just sort of transfer the vibration to the guitar Because, you know, as cool as those cases are and as tough as those cases are, you know, they're very stackable, that sort of thing. The interiors are not as well padded as these interiors. And as far as the zippers go on these are YKK zippers. And if you're into like fashion, leather jackets, handbags, whatever you might be into, you know, you've probably heard that name, YKK. And it's sort of like the gold standard for zippers that won't fail and that won't, you know, bust out on you if you happen to put a little bit too much stuff in this compartment here, which holds more than a hard shell case, by the way. And when I say they thought this out, I really do mean that. Check this out. Reflective lines here, Gibson logo here for the shoulder straps. You've even got this sort of under, like, so you can grab it like this and just sort of pick it up and take it with you. If you just want to grab it and pick it up and move it, or if you just want to grab it and just take it with you somewhere really quick, just move it from spot to spot, you can do that very easily. And the interiors are very nice as well on these. The actual material in the interior is pretty much the same sort of feel. And when I say material, I mean just the very out, like the fuzzy sort of feeling. It's the same sort of feel that you'll get in a Gibson USA hard case. Again, you've got very thick padding here that will absorb. You've also got a cool leather Gibson logo that goes over the neck of the guitar as it sits in here. So, I mean, you can look at the spec sheet, and I'm, again, have been just as guilty of this. You can look at the spec sheet and say, oh, it's just got a gig bag. But there's some real thought, some real sort of cool, this black leather is just cool. And some models still come with the brown leather, I think, with the pink interior that sort of mirrors the Gibson USA traditional cases that you commonly think of. If you think a little bit outside of the box of tradition, this is a really cool case to have all the way around. And some of the stuff that's included with this guitar too, pretty cool. You still do get a Gibson strap even at that price point. You also do get, if you do prefer it, and especially on some of the other colors it may work, you do get a blank multi-ply truss rod cover. And then of course you get your bag of goodies here that I'm not going to break the seal on because this is a new guitar and I don't want to undo it, but you get a cleaning cloth, owner's manual, and a truss rod adjustment tool in here as well. Only thing I'm a little bit bummed about as far as that goes, you do not get the multi-tool that comes with some of the other sort of higher end Gibsons. So yeah, overall, just a cool guitar, cool aesthetic. I think what you guys really probably want to hear is what this guitar sounds like. Does it really change a whole lot to have a much, much thinner body? I don't think it really does. You'll see shortly. You know, some of the snap is gone because there's no maple here. Does it sound like an SG? Not necessarily. The body is still thicker than an SG, so it still exudes a lot of the Les Paul qualities tonally that you might be looking for. So I guess without further ado, let's just go ahead and play this thing and see how it sounds. I'm gonna use a Line 6 Helix, and we're gonna use like a clean amp, probably the US Princess amp model. It's on here, sort of model after a Princeton. And we're also gonna use Brit 2203. I'm just gonna go in between the pickups on both. So without further ado, let's rock. Okay, gang, so that was a overview, rundown, and demo of the Gibson Les Paul Modern Lite TV Satin Wheat. Tell me what you think in the comments below. Also, if you dug this video and you've seen any of the old videos, you want to see more content, like and subscribe, hit that notification bell. Give me your thoughts in the comments below. What do you like about this guitar? What do you dislike about this guitar? What do you think on the feel of a guitar versus just the spec sheet? What do you think on the gig bag versus a hard case? Just anything you want to chat about, chat with me down in the comments below, gang. Thank you all a ton. Check us out at mountainmusicexchange.com. Check out that new arrival section. Anything you see on there is in stock. That means we do have it. If you see it, let us know. We'll get you hooked up good. And also check us out on Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram. And of course, check out Haas's short videos here on the channel. Gang, that's got us for this one. I'm Clay. You rock. And wherever you're at, whatever you're doing, make it loud. See you, gang.